Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Tiny Potato Productions. It is Wednesday, April 8th. I hope you've been enjoying Chapter 13 about therapy and intervention in psychological disorders. I mentioned before that I got not a single beautiful red plaid nightshirt for Christmas, but several. And I'd like to model another one for you today. This is the more lightweight woven blue nightgown. Privileged to demonstrate its. Look at that. I mean, come on, aren't you jealous? Just a little bit, don't you wish? Uh, wish I could see you. Wish I could read your faces. Wish I could see your reactions. We will be back together in the fall. All right. That being said, let's go ahead and get on with it. Today, we're going to move on with behavioral, cognitive behavioral, a little bit of solution focused, which I'm throwing in there for my own edification, and group therapy, couples and family. So let's get started. Behavioral therapy and behavior modification are two terms that are often interchangeable, but your book makes a distinction. Your book says that behavior therapy is something that is concerned with classical conditioning, which is to say forming or breaking associations through experience, whereas behavior modification is operant conditioning, that is changing someone's behavior via rewards and punishments. So if that's what the book is going to do, and that's the book that we're learning from, let's go ahead and take those definitions as given for the rest of this semester. But here's the outlook of the behavior therapist, the behavior modifier, when it comes to mental illness. Mental illness, or at least the kind that a behavior therapist is willing to engage with, is caused by a history of associations in the past or a history of rewards and punishments in the past, depending on whether you're talking about operant or classical conditioning. To the behavior therapist, the cure, or the way that they can help people to function better, is to form new associations or to set up a new set of contingencies between one's behavior and the rewards and punishments that they experience. In this way, the therapist is, I don't want to be unfair, I'm not sure if they think of themselves this way, but relative to other therapies, the therapist and the behavior modification plan is kind of like a programmer, treating their client with empathy and engagement and humanity, but nevertheless still seeing them as an information processing machine that could use some reprogramming. So they are, in a sense, a programmer. A healthy person, therefore, is one who behaves in a healthy way. That's how you see progress. That's how you see good work done in behavior therapy, is someone's behavior changes. It is focused on behavior as a problem and behavior as a solution. One of the methods by which behavior therapist will work with a person is called systematic desensitization. Systematic desensitization is specifically for fears or phobias. Systematic desensitization is an application of classical conditioning whereby the person attempts to break the link between some stimulus and the response. So let's assume that somebody is having an overwhelming fear of clowns that has resulted in them not being able to leave the house or go to work because somewhere out there a clown might be waiting. I'm not sure if any of you have seen the classic 1980s, 70s movie Poltergeist. I did. I saw a little bit of it on accident when I was a kid, not even necessarily the whole thing. And I still don't watch scary movies to this day. Cabin in the Woods is about as far as I go on that. But the scene here is from that movie Poltergeist, where by virtue of the fact that a house is haunted, one of the toy clowns in a boy's bedroom comes to life and attempts to kill that boy. Having seen this scene in Poltergeist, clowns became something that I really didn't want to have around me. And I remember very specifically staying over at my grandmother's house, and a very innocent looking, sweet, knit clown was sitting, unbeknownst to me, on the dresser facing my bed, and it was not going to be okay for me to sleep with that clown there. So let's just break that down in terms of classical conditioning. The fear of death, of someone going for you to kill you, is an unconditional and unconditioned stimulus that would result in fear. A killer anything means fear. But having seen Poltergeist, or perhaps It 2, or having been to a circus, many opportunities to associate clowns with this feeling means that clowns are now associated with something that is trying to kill you, and that is now eliciting the response, which is fear. So what you want to do in systematic desensitization is to decouple the concepts of clowns and death, so that clowns no longer evoke the response of fear. And the way you do this is by giving people the stimulus of clowns, but doing so under a situation where they're having a response that is incompatible with fear. The insight here is that fear, anxiety, phobia, and dysfunctional arousal is incompatible with the state of physical and mental relaxation. So if you can keep somebody in a state of relaxation by doing something like having them focus on their breathing, or in sequence, clench their toes and release them, clench their legs and release them, clench their torso and release it, relieving all that tension, getting into a deep state of relaxation, and then slowly exposing them to things that are in a hierarchy more and more and more and more likely to elicit strong fear responses relative to your particular phobia. Systematic desensitization systematically maintains that level of relaxation as you go up this hierarchy of fear, to the point where if you can imagine buying tickets for the circus and you can stay relaxed, then you can think about maybe actually getting in the car to go to the circus, and then you can imagine stepping out of the car, and then you can imagine seeing far off in the distance a balloon that you know is probably attached to a clown, and then maybe pull out a book in the therapist's office and look at a picture of a clown, and to the point where maybe eventually you can actually be in the same room with the toy clown and still be in a state of relaxation. At that point, systematic desensitization has done its work, and you're able to function in such a way that you maintain emotional stability even when exposed to your phobic stimulus. Now, this is the way that it's supposed to work. Sometimes it doesn't. This is the opening scene from a classic, one of my wife's favorites, actually. When I was making up this lecture, she was listening to me put the clips in. She's like, oh my God, let me watch it. This is from the movie French Kiss with Meg Ryan and Kevin Kline. But this is a popular portrayal, funny, whatever portrayal of systematic desensitization, and you will hear the therapist over the airwaves giving Meg Ryan techniques that are supposed to be keeping her in this state of relaxation as she goes through the end goal of systematic desensitization, which is to experience the fearful stimulus as strongly as possible while still maintaining a sense of relaxation.
Please check that your seatbelt is fastened and that your chair back is in the upright position. We'll be taking off shortly. Kate?
Yes.
Are you prepared to have a pleasant flight?
Yes.
Tell me, Kate, what are you thinking about?
Twisted steel. Ball of fire, naked baby screaming for his mother.
Kate, what happened to your little stone cottage? Picture it now.
Okay. Oh my God!
And don't forget your takeoff mantra. What are the words you chant softly in your head?
We're going down, we're going down, we're going down, we're going down.
Kate.
Okay. lifelong mantra.
Oh?
Yeah, I don't love Paris, I don't like the French, and I don't really want to go on this trip. Oh. God, no.
Kate, you can do this.
I can't do this. I don't belong on an airplane.
Kate, what do you think you're doing?
Let me out of here! I don't want to die!
Okay, we're going down, we're going down, we're going down, we're going down. Okay. Kills my wife every time. Not literally, that would kill. Okay, never mind. If you jumped right to that intervention without a hierarchy of fears that you kept relaxed during the lower hierarchies, you would not be engaged in systematic desensitization. You would be engaged in a different method called flooding. Flooding isn't really recommended. I want you to know what it is, but I don't know that you'll find anybody who would do it because it kind of has a certain amount of faith that you will get over your fear if you make it through the flooding paradigm. But in the moment, it is extremely stressful. It's probably unnecessarily stressful given that systematic desensitization is an option. And there's a good chance that it's not even going to work. So here's the thing. If you put somebody into an extremely stressful situation that they are experiencing as intensely as possible, a fear that they've been carrying around, the idea with flooding is that if they experience that long enough without having the consequence like death or a plane crash that they were fearing so much, they would just eventually wear out with the fear and say, I guess this fear wasn't worth it. But having lived with my wife long enough to have experienced time after time after time where flight created anxiety, and then we landed, and then we had to look forward to the next flight, and that created anxiety, and then we flew and we landed. What's actually going on is that the experience of being in an airplane is so anxiety provoking, so terrible, and so fearful that it is now worse than it was before, because the thought of getting on an airplane is now an anticipation of the fear and anxiety that is going to be felt on that plane. Absent any real crash, any tragedy, knowing that you're going to feel awful when you're on a plane is itself something to fear, and that is what we call sensitization. When you get a stronger and stronger and stronger response to exposure to a stimulus, that's called sensitization, as opposed to desensitization. And you've probably experienced sensitization sometime in your life. Something that you could handle that we might not even notice the first couple of times, but if somebody keeps doing it and 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 doing it, it starts to get really annoying to the point where if you even think they're about to do it again, you get really riled up, you're anxious, and you're ready to snap at them. That's sensitization. You've been sensitized to that stimulus, and it's now affecting you more than it did before. Another version of this kind of systematic desensitization, flooding, exposure therapy is this thing called implosive. Implosive meaning it's kind of like on the inside, but it basically involves not putting you in your fearful situation, but having you be in the therapist's office while the therapist paints a picture for you with words, and in your mind you go right to experiencing the most extreme form of your anxiety, of your stimulus. So after that is behavior modification. Okay, after classical conditioning is operant conditioning, and this is the realm of behavior modification. Behavior modification is something that was like the end all be all, very, very cool and important as we moved away from Freudian and as we moved away from the more like, I'll be honest with you, kind of hippie sort of humanist stuff in the 70s, where people were doing communes and confrontation weekends and things that just seemed a little bit kind of out there for people. Behavior modification was returned to what sounded like really sensible applications of psychology. It is still the most popular way to intervene with some populations for some problems. Autism is addressed when it comes to psychotherapy exclusively at this point by applied behavior analysis, ABA. If you're looking to work with people on the autism spectrum in your profession, ABA therapy is what you will be learning. Okay, you will end up, if you reach the top of your profession, being a BCBA, a behavior consultant board certified. Okay, so especially with children, especially with populations of people with disabilities, developmental disabilities, behavior modification is a very, very well used tool. There are ways that you want to go about modifying behavior that are likely to result in better outcomes than other ways. We know that behavior modification and operant conditioning involves rewards and punishments. But here's the thing, you always want to start with the rewards. You want to find a way to catch, recognize, and reward behavior that you want to see before you do anything else. That means that positive reinforcement, if you can get there, if you can manage to do it, is a great way to start off a behavioral program. So positive reinforcement just means that you see somebody doing a behavior that you want them to do, you give them a reinforcement, and then you increase the probability or the strength or the frequency of that behavior. Now, you don't necessarily want to be giving people something that they want all the time, because that may satiate them. If your reward is a food reward, people get full. If your reward is a monetary reward, that can get really expensive. So one way to kind of slow down the pace of what people acquire through a positive reinforcement system, but nevertheless give them a lot of opportunities to experience the event of reward, is by doing this thing called a token economy system. A token economy gives you basically worthless markers of reinforcement that are not worth anything on their own, but they only become imbued with worth when you trade more than one of them in for a backup reinforcer. So this happens at my son's school. That's a daily thing. They have a certain number of points that they get for engaging with the activity that's going on at 10 o'clock, engaging with the activity that's going on at 10:30, engaging at the activity, If they have so many points by the end of the day, they get to pick some reward out of the reward options. And this gets, for the school, very effective and very cheap, because my son, at the end of the day, having been working hard and quietly for 4.5 hours, turns in his reward tokens for the opportunity to ride a big, thick tire-wheeled tricycle up and down the halls for 3 or 4 minutes. That's it. Okay, to get a person to work that hard for that cheap and easy of a backup reinforcer is really what makes an effective behavior modification program. But by the way, it's also being done to you at lots of different points in your interactions with other people. People are modifying your behavior all the time. Your employer might modify your behavior by offering you money to do things for them. Money is a token. Money does not have any worth unless you trade it in for a backup reinforcer. But I love the idea that return customer loyalty programs, everybody probably has a Sweet Frog card in their pocket or a Chipotle card, whereby if you do what they want 8, 9 times in a row and they stamp your card, by the time you're done giving them money 9 times, you can come in and say, hey, I've shopped with you 9 times, and get a backup reinforcer for a free meal before you then start it again. Okay? So this is not just for people with developmental disabilities. This is not just for kids. Everybody has a mechanism in their brain that could potentially be responsive to a behavior modification program. Okay. But if you are going to go in for punishment, there are ways to do it well. There are ways that you can't do it well. Punishment comes in during those times when a undesirable behavior is so frequent that it needs to be dealt with, and punishment is the only way to get somebody to lower the frequency. Now, in the cartoon down here, you have, if you can't read it, a police officer pulling somebody over to stop sign and saying, thank you for driving safely, sir. That would be a positive reinforcement behavior modification method for getting people to obey stop signs. However, that's not really going to be effective, because in order to reward somebody frequently enough for doing the right thing, you would have to increase police presence to the point where it would be really expensive, really kind of oppressive. And what kind of reinforcer are you going to get besides a nice word? So the way the police work is they do punishment. They find when somebody does the rare-ish event that needs to be punished, catch them, and then apply that punishment. In real life with therapists, usually something that evokes a punishment program is something that is dangerous. A simply annoying behavior or simply problematic behavior is going to be something where people can sit down, get creative, and work through a positive reinforcement system. The positive reinforcement would be for a behavior that is incompatible with the problematic behavior. So if you are worried about a kid who's out of their seat all the time, you don't want to punish them for getting out of their seat. You want to reward them for sitting in their seat. But if a child is doing something dangerous, like banging their head against a concrete wall many times a minute, or being violent or being destructive, and you are not able to put in and substitute a different behavior for that, then it might be necessary to instantiate a punishment program whereby they get some aversive event if they engage in the thing that is frankly dangerous. In settings with people with severe developmental disabilities, this might take the form of something like a helmet that they would wear that has a water pump hooked up to it, so that if they hit their head or they destroy something or they hit someone else, a small squirt of water can be applied in the helmet that gets their face or their head wet, which they really find aversive. Now, this is typically not something that we like to think about. This kind of edges on the idea of torture or mistreatment. And so typically a punishment program done by a therapist has to undergo many layers of review and endorsement and consideration, where the whole schedule is laid out and you know exactly what you're going to do and when in order for it to be ethical. But sometimes it's the only choice. The reason it's a problem is because if you initiate a punishment program on someone, it can lead to them reacting to you in an aggressive way, especially if it's not well thought out and planned and ethical. If you just kind of do an ad hoc punishment program whereby you smack somebody because they are not doing as you tell them to, that can lead to an aggressive response in return. You aggress on them, they'll aggress on you. That's just kind of human nature. The other thing is, if you rely on punishment a lot as a therapist, can become the stimulus. You, the therapist, can become the stimulus that predicts that a client is about to get punished. And that can be really bad for any kind of therapeutic relationship. If you can imagine, you're going about your day, you're going about your life, everything's pretty fine. Then your therapist shows up and you're like, oh my God, now I'm going to get punished. That would make you as a therapist very difficult to work with. Another disadvantage to punishment is that punishment only reduces behavior. That's what a punishment is. A punishment is something that reduces the frequency of behavior when it follows that behavior. It doesn't replace that behavior with an alternative, desirable behavior. So a perfect punishment system could result in somebody who sits in a corner, stares into space, and does nothing. Well, great. They've stopped doing the thing you wanted them to do, but what are they doing? And the other thing is that punishment is something that actually comes naturally to human beings. It is easy to overuse, and so you want to be very careful as a therapist not to use it when there's any other options. Punishment is often reactive. It's the thing that you do spontaneously in the moment when you are at the end of your rope or frustrated or annoyed. It often comes into play when someone isn't really willing to put in the work to be creative, to think of a positive reinforcement system, doesn't have a lot of attention to give. And that sounds pejorative, but it also often happens to parents and teachers who really don't have the resources made available to them to do the job that they really wish that they could do. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're lazy, but it might mean that you are overworked, that you have a class that is too large, that you're getting no support from your school, that you're perhaps getting no support from your co-parent, that you do not have enough opportunity to sleep after you work 2 or 3 jobs, that you do not have family support. So Pretty often, people who are not reinforced, I don't want to use that word wrong, are not given the resources or have access to the resources necessary for support in their community, may resort to punishment because they just don't have what they need to be more creative, because positive reinforcement takes a lot more attention, creativity, energy, and planning. The other thing that can be wrong with the punishment program is that it can backfire, and it can backfire pretty easily, and it backfires with a lot of kids, and here's why. If the major thing that a child is going for, striving for in interaction with their parents is attention, is just somebody to speak to them or look at them or acknowledge their existence, it is often the case that a child will figure out that they are easy to ignore unless they are doing something that requires punishment. Now, here's where punishment stops being punishment. If a child will do something like take the flour out of the cupboard and start spreading it on the floor, and your response is, "Oh my God, stop doing that, what are you doing?" and you smack them on the butt or you send them to their room, you may think that you have punished that behavior because you smacked them or you sent them to your room, and those are punishments, right? No. If that attention that comes along with being smacked or sent to the room or yelled at is in fact something that reinforces that child because they were in such desperate need of attention that they are willing to spread flour on the floor or make a mess again in order to get that attention, then that whole process was not a process of punishment at all. That was a process of reinforcement. You have now made misbehavior more likely in the future because your attention came along after bad behavior. The last kind of behavior modification technique that the book wants to address, and I want to address, is aversion therapy. Aversion therapy is where somebody is being reinforced for a behavior that's problematic for them, and you want to make sure that that behavior does not continue to generate reinforcers, but instead generates punishments. So aversion therapy isn't actually very popular. It's not demonstrably very effective. People's reward and punishment systems are more complex than the classical behaviorists would probably like to admit. But a couple of examples here. There's this thing called antabuse. It is a drug that you take at the beginning of the day, and it doesn't necessarily do anything to you unless it is put into the presence of alcohol that you would drink at any time later in the day. And it produces a very aversive reaction, nausea, vomiting, the kind of thing that would make you regret having mixed it with alcohol in the first place. So if you are taking your antabuse, for the rest of that day, a drink will not be reinforcing, a drink will be punishing. Doesn't have a great track record, as I said. Somebody who really wants to drink can just not take their antabuse or find an excuse not to, or forget, play games in their own mind about what it is that they ought to be doing. Apparently, antabuse as a drug can be abused itself because it does have some psychotropic effects, but all that aside, that's an example of what it is that I'm talking about. Fictionally, then, we kind of have to go to fiction sometimes to find good examples of this. This is a still from Clockwork Orange, if you've never seen it, a movie that is based on a dystopian vision of behaviorism being true. The theme of this movie was, if we have finally unlocked the code of the human brain, we can program people to like what we want them to like, to not like what we don't want them to like, make them behave in any way that we want so that they don't really have any will at all. And the movie explores the ramifications of that throughout the film. But one of the most famous scenes is where they are taking a psychopathic, violent person and basically making them watch images and pairing those images with aversive or rewarding stimuli, and in a classic operant conditioning paradigm. That's why his eyes are propped open like that, so that he can't stop looking. He has to get those visual signals, and they have to be associated with aversive aversive consequences, so that he becomes to associate the things that he was doing violently in society with an unpleasant experience in his body, and that therefore that was supposed to reprogram him to be someone who just couldn't do violence to anyone anymore. In the movie, it worked. In real life, it would be much more complicated than that. Probably wouldn't have that effect, or else we probably would end up trying to give it a shot and using it. All right, that's been a bit of a while. Here's a very short couple of minutes comedy break. Dane Cook was huge in like early 2000s. He kind of flamed out and haven't heard a lot from him lately. But the funny thing is, during the first few classes that I ever taught, Dane Cook was like on my playlist a lot. And the energy that I tried to bring to class had a lot of the same kind of very extreme modulations and physical movements that I was kind of, I think, patterning off of his stand-up. I'm really more of a John Lovett, kind of Ron White sort of an energy now. But here you go. It's a little bit of a fun one, break. And fascinatingly enough, he gets through these 3 minutes without cussing. So, you know, your parents can listen too if you want.
We never had a pool, right? So one summer, I remember my dad, to make me happy, he knew I was bummed out because we didn't have the pool. So one summer, he bought us this thing. It was yellow. You lit it on the lawn, spray with the water, run across. Slip and slide, yeah. Would have been fun if Dad checked for rocks before he laid it down. Slip and bleed from the anus, they should have called this ride. I was like, watch this, Mom. Yeah. Luckily, I was wearing that pad. I like that one. You don't have to. This is for me. I was a weird kid, man. I had some troubles. I had some problems, ma'am. I had some problems. I couldn't spell when I was a little kid. I couldn't spell, so my parents got all concerned. So they went down to the toy store. They bought me a little red box called Speak and Spell. You remember that, Speak and Spell? They shouldn't have called it Speak and Spell, but they should have called it Speak like the devil. Remember the voice? A-E-I-O-U. What was that? A-B-C-E. That thing was evil. A-L-M-N. That thing would wake me in the middle of the night, like 2 in the morning. Play with me. Get up. I want to spell right now. I'm 8 years old. I spell great. I talk like a freak. I'm like, Mom, something is wrong. Something is W-R-O-N-G. I had that game Operation. Remember the game Operation? Big naked white guy. He had no pee-pee at all. He had no scrumdiddlyumptious. He had no cash and prizes.
All right. Now that that's done, a slight shift to the cognitive therapies. Cognitive therapy and behavioral therapy actually have a tendency to go really well hand in hand, to the point where a lot of people say that as a practitioner, they are cognitive behavioral. The most popular self-description for therapists these days is cognitive behavioral therapy. They take techniques from operant classical conditioning, and they throw in techniques about people addressing their own cognitions to help them overcome whatever problems they're having in life. But if you want to separate them out cleanly, like we're going to try to do here, then here's where we'll address the cognitive part. The cognitive therapist thinks about illness, mental illness, as something that has to do with maladaptive thoughts and maladaptive beliefs. It is how you are processing the information and the events that happen to you that then result in your emotions, that then result in your behavior. The cure then for a cognitive therapist would be to replace maladaptive thoughts and beliefs with adaptive thinking, adaptive perspectives, adaptive beliefs. The messages that you tell yourself about what's happening to you need to change in order for the things that are happening to you to have a different effect on you. The therapist here then is somewhat of an expert, somebody who does in fact know a little bit more than the average person, but they're not really like a mysterious floating knowledge god like a Freudian, but they're more of a tutor. walking you through and stepping you through some of the things that the cognitive behavioral therapists have found to be effective, and walking you through kind of a course on managing your own cognitions. Okay. A healthy person, then, by the time that this has been resolved successfully, at least for the problem that you're dealing with at that particular time, it's a person who thinks adaptively, thinks rationally, doesn't sabotage themselves with the message they give themselves about what's happening to them. Now, I've already, as I said, I told you I was going to do it, but I have already jumped the gun and given you a pretty extensive preview of Albert Ellis's rational emotive therapy, or the rational emotive behavior therapy. So I won't go back over all that stuff that I did again, but I'll give you a smattering of new things that I didn't really go into in depth when I lectured on our EBT a couple of chapters ago. Rational emotive therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, is concentrating on replacing irrational thoughts with rational thoughts. And what Ellis would call an irrational thought is something that a lot of us cling to without really categorizing it as irrational. Ellis sees rigid thinking as irrational. Rigid thinking being you're not able to think about new perspectives, you're not willing to change your mind, you say something has to be the way it's always been done. Ellison says that that is irrational. We have to have grilled cheese sandwiches on Sunday afternoon because that's what we do on Sunday afternoon. Ellis says that's an irrational thought that can cause anxiety and stress. Other rational thoughts are this either or thing, things that are extreme or things that have to be one way or have to be another. You are either a good person or you are a bad person. That's never true. There's nobody you'll ever meet who falls completely into the good category or completely into the bad category. Something either has to be the best or it was terrible. The food at a restaurant either has to be the most wonderful meal you've ever eaten or it was garbage. Marvel movies can't just be kind of fun and entertaining and a good way to spend a couple of hours. They have to be either an affront to cinema, Martin Scorsese, or they have to be society's savior. Okay, that's the either or thinking, and that can lead to bad experiences in life if you think that something has to be either completely this or completely that. Irrational thoughts are out of proportion. Everything is a huge deal, whereas most things are actually a medium deal or a small deal. And the irrational person, and I touched on this before, but I'll mention it again, has thoughts that tend to center around this can't happen. This can't happen to me. It just can't. It must not happen. And that's where it stops. People just say to themselves, that can't happen. And then they just worry about it happening because it must not. Rational thoughts, on the other hand, have a tendency to be flexible. Hey, we usually have grilled cheese on Sunday, but I guess pigs in the blanket wouldn't be so bad. Let's give it a shot. Rational people understand that things fall on the continuum from worst to best, and that the nice thing is you'll probably never end up with over here at worst. You'll probably be somewhere in the middle, all right? Things that happen to them get perceived as in proportion. Yes, it is not great that I didn't get the GPA that I wanted, but it is also not the end of the world. It could have been worse, even though it could have been better. I could be having a better hair day, but you know what? It's not going to ruin my life. I'm going to forget about it in a week. So yeah, I can be disappointed. The rational thinker also doesn't stop with something can't happen to me. They think, you know what? Anything that's possible is possible. It could happen. And if it did, what would happen then? And that is, calling back to a previous slide, that is kind of a small version of implosive therapy for yourself, where you imagine the thing that you think must not happen actually happening, and then think, would life in fact go on? Would I be disappointed? Or would I be dead? And that's where we get these things here. Irrational thinking has a tendency to lead to depression, anxiety, guilt, shame, negative messages, negative experiences, which turns out to be the whole ballgame. For a person who is in this paradigm of therapy, they're kind of existential themselves. The only thing that really ends up mattering at the end of the day is human experience. So whatever your life is going to be like, whatever existence you're going to end up having, if you spend that existence experiencing more misery than you have to, then there's never any possible trade-off for that. That's just the end of the game. That's what it is. That was your score. Your score was how much misery you experienced over the course of your life versus how much joy you could have gotten out of the same experience. So it is irrational to be engaged in messages that cause your experience in life to be full of depression, anxiety, guilt, and shame. The rational person can experience negative emotion, but instead of depression, they experience a rational response to bad events, which is sadness. Instead of anxiety, constantly worrying and eating themselves up with bad possibilities, they might have concern. Concern can result in action. Anxiety usually results in paralysis. They can experience remorse. They can say, I wish I had not done that, and I will change my behavior into the future, which is different from a crushing guilt. And they can have regret. They can say, that's not a thing I wish I would do again. I regret having done that. If I had to do it all over again, I'd choose differently. But that is different from the destructive power of shame. So that's rational emotive therapy. Associated with that very closely is the general aspects of cognitive therapy as laid down by Beck. Beck and Ellis have a lot of overlap in terms of what they did with their clients. But Beck is more general in confronting negativity, negative thought processes, unhealthy thought processes. So Beck would have you as a cognitive therapist writing down a lot, doing a lot of tracking of your thoughts, doing a lot of recording of the way that you're thinking, recording your behavior, and doing things that were homework for you. Beck is one of these pioneers in therapy that said, you're only meeting with me an hour a week. That means that 99% of your time is spent outside this office. So let's put the work there. I'm going to give you your assignments and go over with them with you here in therapy, but you're going to do most of the work outside of therapy as homework. So a lot of the homework had to do with tracking and identifying thoughts such as, I'm stupid. What's the point of that message? There's no point to that message. It doesn't do you any good. It doesn't motivate you towards anything better. It just makes you feel worse about yourself so that you're less motivated to do something which might make you feel smart. Nobody likes me. I'll never succeed. I'll never be happy. The classic one that maybe some of you are experiencing right now, I should have done more with my quarantine. You're seeing all these people on Facebook showing all their cool recipes and their breads and their walks and their cute little projects with their pipe cleaners and their construction paper and their glue. And here I am just trying to make sure that nobody kills each other, that I pick a relatively amusing movie at 6 o'clock and get enough food into everyone that they survive and don't, destroy whatever harmony we have here in the home. That's my goal. But nevertheless, if I was like, man, I was going to get in shape, I was going to eat better, I was going to do all of my lectures off through the end of the semester this week so that I can just have time to myself. No, I'm still running up on the deadlines that I always did. I'm still doing these lectures the day before they have to be done. I'm still putting tests up online at the last minute. That's how I do. I'm not really improving myself. So I can either say, yep, that's the way it is. That's how I'm going to do. I guess that's how I function. But if I were giving myself negative messages about that, I could feel even worse, more anxious, and more stressed out than I do right now. So Beck would say, good for you. There's really no point. Now, there's a reason that we do sometimes think that it's helpful to give ourselves these negative messages. I think that there is a tendency for human beings to set a awful consequence in their future if they don't do something and think that it's a motivating force for them to change course before they run into the awful consequence. Maybe that works for some people. I think it's probably the case that it doesn't work for most. So punishing yourself with negative messages, making yourself feel awful if you didn't do something that you plan to do, is really not like having a personal trainer that really gets you through your workout. It's really more like somebody who's got a rope around your waist going, yeah, you can't do it, which is not really helpful. And a cognitive therapist would likely be working with you to try to do a different way of thinking to keep yourself from holding yourself back. This is something that's completely out of the blue. This is not in the book, but during my training as a therapist, I came across this therapy model, and it actually kind of caught my attention, and I've shared it with people ever since. It's called the solution-focused therapy. Solution-focused therapy was a little bit radical. It was a little bit unique because Whereas traditionally therapy focuses so relentlessly on discovering the problem and fixing the underlying problem to then see results in the person's behavior or thoughts or lifting of depression or lifting of anxiety. In Sue Kim Berg, the most famous proponent of this approach, said, we don't need to worry at all about what causes illness. Whatever the cause is, we can actually kind of work this whole solution in reverse. Start with pursuing the solution with what we want to see in the world. And if we make that happen, everything will just kind of rewind to the point where whatever the problem was, it ends up not being a problem anymore, even if we never understood what it was. So illness is caused by, who the hell cares? Not a question, let's move on. It is unnecessary to even define the problem. Achieving what the client wants is the entirety of the process, and it's the entirety of the goal. And here's a couple of examples of how it's done. There's a technique in solution-focused therapy called the miracle question, which is this. I want you to imagine waking up tomorrow and all of your problems were gone. At which point the client might say, yeah, my problems are, and the therapist goes, no, whatever they are, they're gone. What is it that you would do if you woke up in a world where all of your problems were gone? And a person might be like, well, I'd go for a walk. It'd be nice. I'd say hi to my neighbors. I'd probably do a creative project. I don't know, man, what would a great day look like if I didn't have my money problems or my relationship problems, my family problems? I'd be like, nope. Just tell me what you would do. And the therapist's job then is to recommend or plan for a person to behave in such a way that matches the day that they'd have if their problems were resolved. So the therapist might say, okay, in that case, tomorrow, I want you to get up and take a walk. Tomorrow, I want you to get up and say hi to your neighbors. Tomorrow, and maybe the day after that, I want you to engage in a creative project. Even if all of your problems aren't solved, why don't you act in such a way that you would if they were gone? And in that case, the problems stop having power. They're not holding you back from anything you otherwise would have done. So why are they really problems at all? That's one technique. Another technique is the scaling question, which is this. People sometimes hold themselves back because they insist that their therapy be an absolute cure, that they are feeling 10 out of 10 all the time. But that's pretty much setting up for failure. The solution-focused therapist would say, all right, let's get an idea about where you are feeling right now. How are you right now in your life, in your emotions, in your functions, in your relationships? How do you feel that you are right now? The person would be like, I can imagine things being a little bit worse, but I'm kind of at a 3. And the therapist would say, all right, instead of trying to figure out how you're going to go from a 3 to a 10, what would we need to do to get you from a 3 to a 4? And the person would be like, I don't want to be at a 4. The 4 is still terrible. Yeah, but it's better than where you are now. So how do we move up 1 point? That's another technique for the solution-focused therapist. Another technique for the solution-focused therapist is to focus on times when a person is doing better, when a person is symptom-free. Which is to say, instead of saying, okay, when you have a panic attack, what are you thinking about? Or when you're depressed, what's going through your mind? The solution-focused therapist might say, and those points in time during the day when you feel your best, what's going through your mind? What are you doing? And the person might say, when I have morning coffee and I'm actually sitting in a chair and just catching up on the news, that really is the best part of my day. And they might say, okay, what's going on during that time? Is it that you have something warm in your hand? Is it that you have a little bit of isolation? Is it you have your favorite chair? Is there any way that you can integrate more of that into your day so that you can experience more of these moments that are like the best moment of your day? Okay, so I've gone on about this, but it's because I'm the only source of information you're going to have about this. Solution-focused therapy is also something that was very tightly associated with short-term therapy, by the way. The techniques involved in solution-focused therapy were designed to happen over the course of maybe 3 sessions. The reason that's so important is because in the modern healthcare system that we have, it's oftentimes the case that about 3 sessions is what is covered by your employer if you want to get counseling or therapy without a lot of expense to yourself. Another thing that turns out to be the case, by the way, is that even when somebody has unlimited sessions with a therapist to go see them and talk to them for as long as a relationship as they would like, the typical person usually ends up in that relationship with their therapist for an average of about 3 to 5 sessions. That's what they do when they have infinite sessions. That's also what they do when they're limited in sessions. So it's kind of a good idea as a therapist to have a process in mind that would be designed to be effective in a short-term run, 3 to 5 sessions, which would be maybe 3 weeks or 5 weeks, a little bit about a month. Seems about right. Okay. Lastly, we're going to talk about family therapy and couples therapy. This is therapy that happens in the context of other people. In family or couples therapy, the client turns out not to be any one of the people who are in the room. The client is the relationship itself or the family system itself. So you are looking to serve the connections between people as a therapist. This is a little bit tricky because a lot of times when people come into a family session or a couple session, what they're looking for is somebody to adjudicate their conflict. Somebody to say, like Judge Judy, okay, looks like you are right plaintiff, you are wrong defendant, you pay him, okay, next case. That cannot be what a therapist does. Even if they have strong opinions about who's being a jerk or who's being this, or who's being that, it is not their place. It is not a useful thing to do to assign blame. What they're really trying to do is to create or mold or model a system by which people can adjudicate their own conflicts and grow in their own relationships on into the future. So what happens is that a therapist will create a place where people can feel comfortable and safe for communicating and learning how to communicate and being honest with each other that is not going to result in punitive measures from anybody in that room. It's not going to result in punishment. It's not going to result in suffering. That means that everybody in that room has to respect confidentiality. If you go into a group or a couples or a family therapy session, one of the things that you all agree on is that you will keep what you hear in that session among the people who are involved in that session. There are also ground rules that are set up that people are expected to follow in order to maintain an atmosphere where people can practice that communication in a safe way. That is to say, you're not allowed to make accusations about the past. You're not allowed to really be ugly to people is a lot of the rules that go on. And this is that focus on communication. So when you're focusing on helping people to communicate with each other in this family or couples group, one of the things that's usually necessary is to talk about what you are experiencing in the moment, as opposed to try to dredging up your memory and your spin and your interpretation of the past. You talk about what's going on right there. You are obliged to report your experience, not other people's intentions, which is to say, your experience, how you are experiencing the communication in the room, how you're experiencing someone else is really all that you can say with authority. So that tends to be something that a therapist will encourage people to use in the form of I statements. I statements are kind of annoying sometimes. They are counterintuitive to how we communicate. They sound really silly if you try to use them in everyday language, but they can be a very helpful tool when it comes to therapy, which is like, you're attacking me. No, 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 no. I am experiencing an attack. Now that leaves open the possibility that that person didn't intend to attack me, that I have a negative attribution bias or a hostile attribution bias, any number of things. The only truth that's really in that room is that I am having this experience, and then we can explore that. But to say that you are doing something is usually not helpful, accusatory, hostile, and breaks communication down. So I statements tend to be something that are fairly important. Positive statements are also something that people practice in group and couples and families therapy, which is to say, if you're going to say something to or about someone, it's usually nice to lead with something positive that they've done so that they can get the message that you do recognize their positive attributes, even if they are mixed in with a negative experience. Lastly, group therapy and group counseling is something that's also popular a lot of times around victimhood, addiction, and trauma. A group session is facilitated by someone who usually keeps one person from manipulating or taking up too much time in the group, make sure that any kind of hostile or toxic accusations or communications are kind of kept to a minimum, but who basically just facilitates people talking to each other about their experiences. One of the great things about group therapy is that one of the most powerful influences on people's behavior is the perception and expectations of other people. If you would like to get problematic drinking or drug use under control, one of the best ways to do so is to set yourself up with a bunch of people who are expecting you to get your drug use or under control. It is a little bit like using Carl Rogers's conditions of worth in a way that is somewhat therapeutic. So your worth in that group might kind of hinge on you getting a problematic behavior under control, and that can be exceedingly highly motivating. For trauma, for survivor groups, this can also be a place where someone is still going to feel as if they are alone in their experience, if they're just sharing their experience with one other person, a therapist. But in a group, it's a really good opportunity to normalize that experience and understand that other people have shared something that's similar, even if everybody's experience is unique. So to finish up this week, I'm going to go ahead and play for you a clip from one of my favorite animated shows, Home Movies. It features Brendan Small, who went on to do Metalocalypse. It also features, in the voice of the lunch lady in this scene, H. John Benjamin, who, if you recognize, is Bob from Bob's Burgers and Archer, et cetera, et cetera. If you don't mind recognizing the voice, the dad is Louis C.K. This is from a while ago, and it has to do with the absurdity of people using I statements sometimes, and goes back to one of those themes that I pointed out to you way earlier in the semester, which is that there is a proper and an improper way to use the word feel. Most of the people in this clip are using the word feel in a way that is inappropriate. They are saying, I feel that you. Well, they're instantly getting away from I statements, and they're stating a fact or an opinion as opposed to a feeling, which is probably why this therapy falls apart at the end. But the other thing that I want you to observe is that this family counselor, this family therapist, is trying to set ground rules by which people are giving positive statements and not being hostile and not being aggressive. Again, since it's a show and it's comedy, it doesn't really work that well, but you can see elements of what a therapist is supposed to be doing here.
Okay, go ahead, Linda. Use the gentle talk. Use it to say something to Brendan.
Well, Brendan.
Good. Now we're cooking.
I feel that you and I misunderstand each other.
Brendan, I've got some homework for you. I would like you to try to express exactly how you feel to somebody with whom you have a difficult time communicating using gentle talk.
I wanted to speak to you about the food.
All right, what?
Okay, first of all, what is this?
It's chicken fried steak.
Chicken fried steak. Okay,
It's steak fried in chicken fat. It's good for you.
Okay. I feel that it's important that you know how I feel about the chicken fried steak.
You enjoy it. You like it.
Yes, I feel that when I tried this that I felt that I could vomit.
All right.
Okay, and I feel that was uncalled for.
Did you feel that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I feel that was...
How about another?
Ow.
So let's move on.
Okay. I thought it was important to say something.
Are you mad at me?
No, I just feel that I get bored sometimes when you talk about work.
Oh, well, I didn't know that. And I feel that what you just said is an aggressive attack on me.
I feel that you're raising your voice and trying to hurt my feelings.
Well, I feel that I'm honestly responding.
Well, I feel that if it weren't for your son, we wouldn't be spending all our time and money in stupid therapy.
Doctor, I forgot. I have a note from my mom. I won't be coming back. You know why? Because therapy sucks!
Yeah.
Oh, that felt good.
All right. So I hope you enjoyed that. I got another one coming at you for Friday. We've got 2 more lectures to go on this topic. After that, we've got the exam coming up next Wednesday. Please be ready. Please be prepared. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, we'll see you back here on Friday.